flash.
Is that for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, good evening, and welcome to the public lecture for June. We're delighted to have you here. I'm Susan Benjamin. I'm one of the Science Center chiefs, and I get the honor of introducing our speaker, Tom Sakonic, tonight. Before I get started with the introductions, I do want to remind people, because safety is always utmost in our minds, that if something should happen, follow the exit signs. They're all lit up and easy to find, and go out of the building. If anyone needs to use the restroom, they're right around the corner. So, and I also want to mention that next month we're having a public lecture also, and Dr. Bruce Molnia will be talking about warm ice, the dynamics of rapidly changing glaciers. So come on back next month when it's hot to find out about ice.
Hotter.
So I am very pleased to introduce Dr. Tom Sakonic, who will be our speaker tonight. He's trained as a coastal marine ecologist and is currently a scientist emeritus with USGS, having retired in 2014 from his position as lead scientist, research manager, and climate change science coordinator for the Western Ecological Research Center in Sacramento and the USGS Southwest Climate Science Center based in Tucson, Arizona. Tom earned his bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Connecticut, his master's in ecology and evolution from Stony Brook University in New York, his PhD in zoology from the University of Washington, and did a postdoctoral stint at the West Indies Marine Lab at St. Croix in the Virgin Islands. He spent 20 years as a research ecologist and lecturer at the University of California, Davis, where he also served as the Western Regional Director of the Department of Energy's National Institute for Global Environmental Change for 8 years. He then spent several years with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Sacramento as their branch chief of the Natural Resources Damage Assessment Program and director of the Environmental Contaminants Division before moving on to the USGS. He also served on the Action Coordination Team of the West Coast Governor's Council on Ocean Health, which is addressing, among other issues, climate change impacts to coastal and estuarine ecosystems on the West Coast. He currently maintains research associate appointments at UC Davis with both the Bodega Marine Laboratory and the Department of Wildlife, Fish, and Conservation Biology on the Davis campus. Way back in the 1970s, Tom discovered a new species of amphipod shrimp, which was named in his honor, Paramora sukaneki. And he has produced over 150 publications, including peer-reviewed journal articles, reports, and a book, Marine Life of the Caribbean, co-authored with Jacques Cousteau. We are delighted to have such a distinguished colleague to join us today. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate the invitation and being back here again. I'd like to start by taking a poll, okay? I would like to see hands for those people who believe in climate change. So about half and half, I guess, right? No, seriously, I would like to get away from belief systems and opinions, and I would like to focus on data and facts tonight, specifically related to USGS's mission of having unbiased science, and I'll try to do that throughout the talk tonight, and we can talk about other things maybe later on. I do have two associations, or two appointments, one with USGS over on this side, and one with UC Davis over on this side, and I may need to change hats later on to be able to speak about things one way or the other. So just be aware I might grab a hat at some point. So basically, anybody who's not been living under a rock knows that the world is changing, especially weather and long-term climate. And things like temperature is going up, rainfall is either going up or going down, but extremes, snowpack is going down, fires are going up, droughts are up, floods are up, tornadoes and hurricanes are up and occurring in bizarre locations and bizarre timing in terms of seasonality. Sea level rise is up. El Nino events are becoming more frequent. Seasonality is unpredictable, and ocean productivity is unclear. With all of that, I think we'll try to move on. However, I would like to start us off with a grounding, so we're all on the same page to start out with. Anybody that's gone to high school, I won't have a poll on that. You probably have been exposed to the natural greenhouse effect, which basically is, the sun beats down on the Earth, heats a portion of the Earth, and some of that energy is reflected back out through the atmosphere into space. Now, some of that is captured by some greenhouse gases, heat-trapping gases. CO2, nitrous oxide, and methane are three of the most important greenhouse gases. And the human-enhanced greenhouse effect is basically the same. Sun beats down on the Earth, heats a portion of it, some of that's reflected back out into space. And since there's more greenhouse gases, more of these heat-trapping gases, that traps more of the heat, and we have a warmer Earth. So keep that in mind as we move forward. We've known about this heat-trapping gas problem for quite some time. Back in the 1700s, we started recognizing it. And in the 1800s, this fellow right here, Savante Irenaeus, was the first one to write a model and describe the equations necessary to understand how carbon dioxide in the atmosphere actually traps heat and contains it within our sphere. And it took him 2 years to write this model to understand that. And at the end of that, and he did it all by hand. There was no computers back then. After the 2 years, his wife left him. So I don't know what that says about dedicated scientists, but he was one of the first. So just in addition to letting you know how old this understanding has been, this is a newspaper article from 1912 from New Zealand, and I'll read it to you. You probably won't be able to see it up there, but this is coal consumption affecting climate. The furnaces of the world are now burning about 2 billion tons of coal a year. When this is burned, uniting with oxygen, it adds about 7 billion tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere yearly. This tends to make the air a more effective blanket for the Earth and to raise its temperature. This effect may be considerable in a few centuries. Well, we're already feeling it and understanding more about that. I also need to have you understand about the scientific community in terms of doing their diligence in evaluating climate change publications. 97% when this particular figure was made, and now it's up to 99% of the scientists' papers and publications that claim a position or state a position on global warming agree that not only is it real, but it's also influenced heavily by man's actions. So that's the consensus project. You can look it up yourself. So what I like to say is scientists are the map makers. We provide the data and the information to pass on to you guys, you, the citizens, and the policymakers, I put that in quotes these days, are the navigators. So we give you the information, and you derive and develop the policies that our country will follow, and similarly in other countries as well. There's thousands and thousands of these scientists working on this, and I will talk a little bit about that later on. So what are the tools and the data that we use to investigate climate change? We have modern evidence and things that we actually measure, and we have proxies. So modern evidence is things like global temperature and tidal gauge records over the past 150 years that we've been measuring. Atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations have been measured since 1958 on a regular basis. We'll talk about that. Altered phenologies, what's happening in the ecological world. When do the first buds come out on trees? When do they first flower? When do birds start nesting and migrating? All of those things we've been measuring for a long time. And then we have prehistoric evidence, these proxies, which are oxygen isotopes and various chemicals in marine and freshwater animal shells, tree ring data, sediment core data, and ice core data, which we'll be looking at a fair amount as well. So this is the main culprit that we're going to be talking about, carbon dioxide. It's a pretty simple molecule, one atom of carbon, way down here, the black carbon, and two atoms of oxygen. You don't smell it, you don't hear it, you don't feel it, you don't see it, but it has mass. So there is a lot of mass there, despite what it looks like. So where does that come from? It comes primarily from the burning of fossil fuels, such as power plants, automobiles, and all the other kinds of combustion. And in addition, it comes from cement production, cement plant production. There's a lot of carbon dioxide being produced there. And, of course, all of you out here are breathing out carbon dioxide. So if you would all just please hold your breath until we're over with the talk, we would be able to finish off and not have to worry about questions and answers later on, okay? And for you guys out there, please don't blow me kisses while you're listening. I'll just get distracted by that. So let's look at the other end of the spectrum, the other end of the process, and that is uptake. So plants, through the process of photosynthesis, are uptaking carbon dioxide, mixing it with water, and then producing oxygen, and they're producing, what else are they producing? Carbohydrates. So that's where the carbon dioxide is going, into leaves and into the plants. So let's take a closer look at what's happening. This is a figure, this is what I was talking about. This is the measurement of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, first started by Charles Keeling at the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii, about 11,000 feet. And he measured it every month, starting in 1958. So the the red lines up and down, are the variations, annual variations. Every year it's going up and down. And if you look in the lower right, the annual cycle looks a little bit like this. So we start off in January and December in the winter. It's going up, 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 up. We come to about April and May. April and May is when the trees leaf out and start absorbing carbon dioxide. They're taking it literally out of the atmosphere. They're sucking it out of the atmosphere. So the concentration in the atmosphere is going down. So it goes down all the way through the summer into the fall. What's happening in the fall? Leaves are dropping off the trees, at least in the northern hemisphere. This is all northern hemisphere. And then once they drop off, then the concentration of carbon dioxide starts going up again. And that's what happens every year, up and down, up and down, up and down. And the blue line is just the 12-month running average. So we are at now over 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. That's not a special number. It just means that we're going higher and higher and higher. And we'll see what it looked like in the past as well. So here's that same curve, Charles Keeling's carbon dioxide curve, back to 1960. Let's look a little bit further back, using ice core data this time, back 1,000 years. So back 1,000 years, looks like the concentration of carbon dioxide was about 280 parts per million, all the way through 1,000, 1,200, 1,400 years, all the way up to where we are now. And here is where the Industrial Revolution started, somewhere around 1750, 1800, when we started having combustion engines, internal combustion engines. And once we started that, the concentration of carbon dioxide started creeping up and up and up and up to an exponential concentrations. And that kind of looks like, in some people's eyes, it kind of looks like a hockey stick. So that's why this is called the hockey stick curve, and it represents exponential growth. That's what's happening. So here's that curve again. Here's the Industrial Revolution. This is what we just looked at. And here's where we are now, 409. As of last month, we're at 409.7 parts per million. And looking back further, back beyond 1,000 years to 400,000 years ago, we've gone through about 4 ice ages during that time. This is an ice age down here when the concentration of carbon dioxide was about 200 parts per million. And as we get into warmer times, or as the concentration of carbon dioxide goes up, maybe 275 parts per million, the climate gets warmer and we lose the ice. And then it starts all over again. So what we're seeing is, here's 200,000 years ago is about when modern humans started coming out to the landscape. Here's the Industrial Revolution that we were just talking about. And starting here, instead of going back down, it's creeping up at an exponential rate, which is about 20 times or 50 times faster than the recovery from the Ice Age period. So we're going faster than that. So that's an indication that it's an abnormal process, an abnormal change in the concentration of carbon dioxide. So the global community, all the countries of the globe are emitting about 100 million tons of carbon dioxide each day. Remember that little molecule that you can't see, feel, taste? each day into our atmosphere. So last year, it produced about 40 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And the fossil fuel emissions, the burning of fossil fuels, account for about 94% of that total carbon dioxide emissions from human sources as follows. Coal represents about 42% of those emissions, oil 33%, gas, natural gas 19%, and again the cement plants contribute some significant amount. There's also things that contribute to either the increase in carbon dioxide or the lack of ability to reduce carbon dioxide, such as deforestation, which people are using to grow cattle for hamburgers and things like that. So that adds another certain amount that is significant in the overall budget. And I just have to say, in terms of coal being the biggest one that's contributing to carbon dioxide, coal use has been declining over the last 20 years significantly. And that's due primarily to the lower cost of natural gas, competing with it, the alternative renewable energy sources that are coming onto the marketplace, and regulations imposed in place to protect human health. You should also realize that California, as a leader in alternative energy, has 10 times more jobs, about 507,000 jobs in the alternative energy field than does the entire United States in the coal jobs, which is about 51,000. So there's a very, very large discrepancy there. Coal is going out of the market. Alternative energies are coming into the marketplace, and they're reaping huge profits in some areas. And that will continue as they become more efficient and developed. So thousands and thousands of scientists around the globe are working on this problem. It's very complex. I can only skim across the top of some of these subjects here tonight. And they contribute to this Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, and they produce assessment reports about every 5 to 7 years. This is the last set of reports, 4 different reports that came out in 2013, 2014. You can look them up on the internet. You can read them. They're very informative. And this last one here is the synthesis report, which is geared to most people understanding what's going on with the science part. And we're expecting the next set of assessment reports, number 6, in next year sometime. So look forward to that. So who's emitting most of this carbon dioxide in the globe? What countries? Here it is. The top 10 emitters right here. I don't know how many you can identify there, but China is on top. United States is second with 19% of the emissions. And the top 10 countries as a group account for more than 2/3 of the global carbon emissions. The U.S. used to be the first, but China has been growing so rapidly in terms of their emissions that they beat us out about 10 years ago. They took first place, and they're growing more rapidly. So what about the people, individual people, on a per person basis or a per capita basis? Let's finish this one up first. So as I was indicating, China is first, United States is second, and I want you to keep an eye on Canada, okay, on the next figure here. So on a per capita basis, how much is each person using? The U.S. clearly is first in the world in terms of how much each one of you individuals are using. Second is Canada, interestingly. China is way down here. And even though they're producing the most as a country, on an individual basis, they're producing much less than other countries simply because they have such a massive population. And that's diluted across the landscape. So here we have the United States and China, and Canada is number 2 on a per person basis. And primarily that's because they use a lot of heating fuels during the wintertime, and there's so few people there that it really mounts up to high individual per capita basis. And they also have the oil shales. Those oil shale producing facilities produce a huge amount of emissions as well. Okay, let's talk about temperature. Temperature is really very closely related to the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Here's the temperature plot from 1880 to 2015. And you can see it's bouncing around here, but all of a sudden it just takes off down and starts going exponential as well. Now there are certain times, like in the 1890s, when the temperature seemed to go down. And again, In the 1940s, it seemed to go down. But we're dealing with averages, and we're dealing with long-term trends, not individual short time periods. So on the long term, we're seeing that temperature is going up and starting up exponentially as well. Some people focus on these individual little areas and say, oh, the Earth is cooling, the Earth is cooling. Well, that's true. It was during that time. But the big picture is it's warming. And here's the blue line is the graph we just looked at. And the white line is the concentration of carbon dioxide that we just looked at before that. So we're up to 409 parts per million now. And the last time CO2 concentrations were up at this level, over 400 parts per million, humans didn't even exist. Okay? That was about 800,000 to 15 million years ago. Global temperatures were substantially higher. There was almost no ice on the planet, and sea level was about 100 foot higher at that time. Give you some indication of where we might be headed if we don't solve this problem. So how hot is hot? Well, the 10 hottest years were all since 1998, and 2016 was the hottest year. But if we look here, this marks the 39th straight year of above average global annual temperatures from the average. And the odds of that happening by random without global warming is about 1 in 27 million, statistically. That's one you might want to write down. Okay, so 16 out of the 17 top 16 out of the top 17 years have occurred, the hottest years have occurred since the year 2000. And we only have 17 of those years. So 2010 was the hottest year. Then 2014 beat that out. That's the hottest year. And then 2015 beat that out. That's the hottest year ever. And now here comes 2016 is hotter than those years. And 2017, we'll see. But based on what's happening around here, this is this week. I just got this off the weather forecast. There was this huge heat dome over the west and influencing everything. This is yesterday, I guess. Yes. Las Vegas, these are all broken records now. Las Vegas, 117. Phoenix, 119. Tucson, 116. These are all record-breaking temperatures. And that's happening every year, depending on which city, which township you're looking at. They're breaking records all the time. And like I said earlier, sometimes you have tornadoes happening one place, and floods in another place, and droughts in another place. And sometimes they're happening all at the same time within the country and just in different places. So the weather is becoming extreme and unpredictable. So here it is. Here's this week's plot of the country having these massive heat waves which are breaking temperature records. We're having severe storms in the mid-country, Midwest, producing tornadoes up in here. And then we've got torrential rains down here. They've already had 12 inches of rain this past time period here in the last couple of weeks. They're expected to get another 12 to 15 inches of rain. And here it is. Tropical storm Cindy is coming right through here, and that's expected to produce tornadoes up in this alley here. Now, Cindy's my wife's name. And sometimes there's these real storms at our house, too, but they're not related to this. So just want you to understand that. Right, dear? I guess I'll be sleeping outside. No, it's too hot. So where's all this heat going? It's going mostly, 92% of it is going into the ocean. The upper ocean has an enormous amount of heat. The deep ocean has less, but a lot of heat. Some of it is wrapped up in the ice, and some of it's wrapped up in land, but primarily the ocean is absorbing the most of the heat. So let's look closer to home here, locally. These are a couple figures from Mike Dettinger, who's a USGS climatologist at Scripps, and he produced some model runs based on certain different emission scenarios. So he's using certain assumptions of how much emissions we're using, and he did 23 model runs on this for temperature. Here's our 2017, and what we see is that each one of these lines is a different model run. Okay, and what he sees is that 20 of the 23 model runs are in this range from 3 degrees centigrade increase to 6 degrees centigrade increase by the year 2100. And that's centigrade. It's actually 5 to 11 degree increase in Fahrenheit. So we see that there's a strong consensus for warming based on these models that Mike Dettinger has been running. Let's take a look at what he's done with precipitation. Again, he's done another 23 models based on the same assumptions he did for temperature. And what we find is, here's 2017, and 19 of the 23 model runs were in this range, which is basically half of them are above and roughly half of them are below the zero line, which means sometimes we're going to get more rain, sometimes we're going to get less rain. We can't predict it. It's very unpredictable. So there's not a lot of, there's a large amount of uncertainty with respect to precipitation. Some of that's due to the position of the jet stream, which kind of hits California about mid-level. And sometimes it goes up and sometimes it goes down to the south, and it's very unpredictable. So let's look at the temperature variations over the past 12,000 years. About 9,000 years ago, this is when modern man, started agriculture and developing harvesting procedures. About 4,000 years ago, they started developing cities and more communities, social communities. And within that time frame, each one of these lines represents a different location on Earth, and the black line is an average of all of those. So during this last, 9,000 or 10,000 years, when all of human social interactions and evolution has taken place, the temperature has not varied much, if you look at the average, about a half a degree above and a half a degree below the average line. That's all we've known in terms of developing our human culture. And so what we're saying now, what we're seeing in these models, is that we're looking up at 5 and 10 and 11 degrees Fahrenheit increase. This is centigrade, but we're still up at 5 to 7 degrees centigrade increase. And we have never experienced this in human cultural evolution. So there's the 5 to 11 degrees. So I want to run a short video clip to show you, starting in the 1800s, this represents different temperatures around the Earth. The blue and purple are cooler areas. The red and orange are warmer areas. And you can see that it's not the same. It changes all the time. It's jockeying around the Earth, sometimes in the north, sometimes in the south. As we move through the 50s, moving into the 60s, different areas are cooling, more areas are warming. Getting into the 80s and 90s, a little warmer. Getting into the 2000s, 2006. So you can see that the Arctic region, the polar region, that polar region, has warmed a lot. And because of that, we're losing a lot of the Arctic ice, the Arctic sea ice. And I mean, that provides some opportunities, opening up a passageway, but it's also losing ice. So precipitation. Let's talk about precipitation, or not, different extremes. Atmospheric rivers are one form of precipitation that comes from the tropical Pacific area. The weather forecasters like to call it Pineapple Express. They're usually about 250 miles wide and about 1 mile high. And they flow from the mid-Pacific across into California and reach the western coast of California. We don't have an eastern coast, I guess. When the big one hits, you might have shoreline property out here. But anyway, let's take a look at that. This was a superstorm back in December of 2010, and this is the little video. Here's Hawaii out here. Here's California. And you can see all of this moisture in the atmosphere is what this is representing. It's streaming right into primarily Southern California. There's the ticker up here. It repeats itself. And that storm produced 26 inches of rain in coastal California and 17 feet of snow in the Sierra Nevada. The problem is that most of this rain and snow is coming into Southern California. Where are our reservoirs? Primarily Northern California, like Oroville and the other big ones. So that doesn't do us much good when all the rain is falling and then just flowing out to the ocean. So we can't capture that very well. So these atmospheric rivers often happen during El Nino years. And we're going to talk about El Nino in a little bit. So on the other end of the spectrum, we've been in a drought, a long-term drought, for the past 6 years or so. We're still not out of the drought, even though we've had an enormous amount of rainfall in the last year or two. So the West, obviously, is being hit the hardest compared with the middle of the country and the East Coast. And when we take a closer look at California, this region in Central California, especially where we grow our crops, which is producing food for, most of the country, we have this exceptional drought. And I was told that when they made these figures and made the data to go along with them, they found that it was exceeding the extreme drought conditions. They had to make a new color to actually designate the extreme nature and the exceptional nature of this particular drought that we're in. So here's also, this is also related to the snow drought. Every year, the Department of Water Resources goes up to the Sierra Nevada in the same place every single year, and they take a core through the snow to look at snowpack, and they record that. This is what they found in April 1st, 2015. No snow. There's Jerry Brown. There's the Department of Water Resources guy. And here's where it was in 2014, the year before that. Still not much, maybe 3 feet. But the year after that, boom, 2016 was a massive rain and snow year. And this year, it's even larger. 2017, this is what's happening up in the Sierra Nevada. Cabins and homes are being crushed by weight of the snow. Mammoth Ski Resort is a fantastic place to be. So there's good things and bad things about that. But the point here is the massive uncertainty and unpredictability of what's happening with precipitation, exactly what we found with Mike Dettinger's graphs and model runs. So what happens when we have a lot of drought? Well, the farmers down in San Joaquin Valley are pumping groundwater. Where they don't have surface water, they're pumping groundwater. And they've been doing this for decades. Not a bad thing, but that's where the water was, and that's where they're bringing it out. Unfortunately, some of these sedimentary formations, the water-holding ones, once you pump them dry, they tend to collapse. And so they don't recover. You can't pump them back up. They're just down, and they won't be recovering ever again. And as a result of that, the San Joaquin Valley floor in some areas is sinking 2 inches per month. Farmers pumping out the groundwater during our extended drought. And I'm going to show you a little diagram here. This is a diagram of subsidence. So this is 1925, the land surface was up here. 1955, the land surface had sunk, had subsided to here. 1977, it had subsided down to there. That's a real person. That's not a little, plastic soldier guy. That's in the San Joaquin Valley. Benchmark 5661 if you want to look it up. Okay, but today, right now, it's still subsiding at about 1 foot per year. Now, this is not over the whole valley, and I'll show you. It's mostly along the I-5 corridor, and these orange and blue areas, those are areas that are subsided the most. So not down in Bakersfield. There's some subsidence, but this is the worst area here. A lot of this is work by Michelle Sneed from USGS in Sacramento.
Is that subsidence from petroleum?
No, I think it's primarily water table. So because we have droughts, we also have low humidity when everything is really tinder dry, and that causes fires from both from lightning strikes as well as some perpetrated fires that are started by crazy people. Nice sunsets. I like those, but that's about it. So I wanted to show you this Wildfire Tracker put out by, I forget who has it, but the Climate Central people advertise it. And you can drill down into these individual fires online, and you can expand it, and for each individual fire, you can get the statistics on that. How much area is being burned, how much is under control, where exactly it's located, where it's heading, and you can see that this is from August of last year. This area in the West, California, and the entire West was hit pretty hard. What you probably didn't hear about is the fact that Alaska was even worse. It was getting much worse fires. The entire state was being inundated with fire. So just be aware that you can look at these just go to Climate Central and you can do this tracker yourself. And since 1985, the number of large wildfires in the West has increased by 4-fold, and it's getting worse. Here's the temperature increasing since 1970, and the bars represent the frequency of fires. That's just going up and up. Not the same every year. It's not a perfect line, but you can see that it's increasing. SLR, what's that? Sea level rise, thank you. Okay, there's lots of things happening. I mean, most of the coastal states are experiencing some problems with sea level rise. Clearly, San Francisco in California. Florida is doomed? No. Florida's going to be in trouble. Okay, let's put it that way. Alaskan glaciers are calving, and there's other places that we'll talk about in a minute that are having a hard time. Sea level rise is caused by a whole suite of factors, and we don't have time to go into all of those things. It depends on where you are, when you are, how you are. There's a lot of things. However, there's two things that really stand out to sort of describe what happens with sea level rise. About 50% of sea level rise is caused by the melting of glaciers and ice caps. All right? Another 50% is from the expansion of seawater. Now, you might not think that seawater can expand very much, but when you heat it up, it does expand. And literally, the ocean is expanding. And that's why we have some of the sea level rise we have today. Now, a third 50% is caused... No, that's not right. Okay. So the Arctic has been suffering from some of this increased temperature. And if we look at 1980, this is the North Pole, and here's Greenland. Looking at the Arctic in 1980, we had a lot of sea ice. In 2012, you can visually see it's tremendously diminished. This is the minimum that we see in those two areas. And this is the Arctic, and the Antarctic is having problems too. I just returned a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago from an expedition in the Antarctic, and there's things that are happening down there similarly. So here's the Arctic that we just looked at, declining up to 2017, more dramatic decline. Now the Antarctic is a little different. The sea ice there in some areas has been increasing, all right, for quite some time. However, this last 2 or 3 years, it's been dropping off dramatically. Here's a mixture or a combination of the two, Arctic and Antarctic, and you can see at the bottom it's really dropping off. Yes. There's something else that's happening in the Antarctic as well. The Larsen Sea ice shelf has a problem. There's a large crack that has occurred in the ice shelf, which was 70 miles long, I think, in January, and is over 100 miles long now. And there's only about 8 miles remaining the last week or so. It may have broken off at this point. But that shelf represents, that part of the shelf represents about 9 to 12% of the entire Larsen Sea ice shelf. That's kind of what the crack looks like. In some areas it's over 3 miles wide, and it's just moving out to sea. And I'll show you another visual. Here's the crack that's occurring, and this is the Antarctic Peninsula where we were working. And this is January 17. It's probably over here because there's only 8 miles left, and maybe it's 2 miles left today. I'm not sure. This area here that's breaking off is probably the size of about Delaware. All right? And while that ice shelf, which is sitting on top of the ocean, probably isn't going to raise sea level much, what happens is behind the ice shelf, at this margin right here, there's glaciers that feed into that. The glaciers now have nothing to stop them from moving, and they will start moving down and down. They will be melting, and they will be breaking off and moving into the ocean. That's what's going to increase the sea level rise in this particular area. The Larsen B ice shelf disintegrated several years ago, but now it's this section that's calving off more and more. So that's what's happening in the Antarctic. A little closer to home, California. The National Research Council in 2012 did a report and an estimate of what sea level rise would be in Washington, Oregon, and California. And I'm going to walk you through projections for 2030, 2050, and 2100. So in 2030, they're projecting that the sea level rise in California, which is this yellow-orange kind of thing, would be up to about 30 centimeters. which is about 0.8 feet. In 2050, the sea level rise is projected to be up to 60 centimeters, or about 2 feet. And in 2100, the end of the century, it's projected to be up to about 170 centimeters, or about 5 feet. So this is local projections from the National Research Council. Now, if we go out to the tropical Pacific, we have a lot of atolls out there, and atolls are all pretty much formed from the same process, submerging mountains or volcanoes. And because of the way sea level has risen, they're all about 6 feet above sea level. And there's people that live on some of them, and because of that, these people could be in trouble if we have the 5 to 6 foot increase in sea level. And some people have kind of overbuilt their atolls. It might be a little difficult to get to the grocery store if you have 6 foot sea level rise there. So what are they going to do? This is in the Indian Ocean, but let's take a look at the broad Pacific. The Carteret Islands have about 2,000 people on them. They are starting to make plans to move their citizens over to the mainland of Papua New Guinea. The Tuvalu natives are about 10,000 strong. They have made arrangements with New Zealand to move their people down there. These are all people thinking ahead. The Kiribati Islands hold about 110,000 people, and they are already negotiating with Fiji to move their people down to higher islands down there. So these are island nations. However, there's also coastal nations like the Inupiaq Eskimos up in Alaska, which are on the land, but they're on the edge of the land, and the sea ice has been protecting them from inundation. Now that the sea ice is melting, those wave actions from storms are coming in and they're wiping out their villages. So they're going to have to move someplace as well. So you can see throughout the Pacific, these island nations are having a hard time, and they're actually preparing for what's coming. Let's go a little closer to home. I want to show you that the ocean is not the same height everywhere. So Seattle up here in Puget Sound is about 8 feet higher than it is down here in Southern California. And even closer to home, San Francisco Bay Area, we have about 4 foot higher sea level in the South Bay as opposed to Suisun Bay. And this has a lot to do with how the water flushes in the bay, comes in, goes out. But basically, the South Bay is higher in elevation of sea level. So let's take a look, aerial photograph of the bay. Here's Palo Alto. Here we are at this red star in Menlo. Here's the bay, the blue. Here's 101 coming down through here. And here's Middlefield Road right here. And I want you to notice what happens to the bay when we introduce a 100-year storm surge. Okay? No sea level rise, just a 100-year storm surge would produce this. Okay? This is Noah Knoll's work from USGS. He's located here at Menlo. And if we add to that a 50-centimeter sea level rise, we would end up inundating where this light blue area is. If we add 100 centimeters of sea level rise, we'd be up in the yellow zone, and 150 centimeters sea level rise on top of the storm surge, we'd be out at the red zone out here. Now, that's pretty striking. However, let's take a look at what's in the South Bay. What's in the South Bay? Oh, just a few businesses. Little Silicon Valley companies like Dell and Yahoo and Intel, and there's Moffett Field. Oh, geez, we ought to be careful. Where's Susan? So we have a whole bunch of really critical corporations and businesses down here that would probably be affected by something that's happening here. They're talking about building seawalls down here to protect these. There's all kinds of proposals that are being developed. So I want to do another poll of the audience here. I want to know how many people have an iPhone, an iPad, an iPod, an Apple computer, or you have Apple stock. Okay. A couple. Okay. So I want you to know that you're okay, because here's Apple's headquarters down in Cupertino and their new spaceship site, and you're probably good. You can still invest in your Apple stock. And I wish you would, because my son works for Apple, so that's going to help him out a little bit. All right, so be aware of things happening down here. Keep your eyes open when they talk about seawalls. This might happen. Okay, we're on to other ocean processes here, upwelling and El Nino. El Ninos are looked at that they believe that they're increasing in frequency, and this could create a problem. There was some guy that said the coldest winter I ever saw was a summer I spent in San Francisco. I never could figure out who that was. But, oh, here he comes. Oh, yeah, okay. So the problem, quote unquote, with San Francisco for some people is the fact that it's chilly in the summer, and that's because of the fog, okay? Why does the fog happen? Let's take a look at that. Oh, the fog is critical for the redwood forest. I forgot to jump into that. The fog precipitates on the actual branches up in the air and provides moisture for the redwoods, which provide habitat for diverse ecological communities. So the only reason we have these redwood forests is partly because of this fog. Okay, so coastal upwelling is a process whereby northerly winds blow down the coast, and this is the land over here, and and we're sitting in the northern area. North winds are blowing down the coast, and as they do that, they circulate out, and they curve out to the open ocean with the Coriolis effect and the spinning of the Earth, and those winds sweep out on the surface to open ocean. That leaves a void here when that water is missing and is disappearing. And what happens is that the deep ocean water from thousands of feet down comes up to the surface to replace that water. So we have what was called upwelling, and that upwelling, when the cold, deep water hits the surface warm air, you get fog. That's what's happening in San Francisco. Roughly from about March or April on through August is the time when you would expect that. Perfect time in the summer, right? Yeah. So also, in addition to getting the fog, we also get nutrient-rich water coming up from thousands of feet down. The nutrient-rich water provides food, nutrients for phytoplankton. Those provide nutrients for the microscopic zooplankton, which support food for small fish, large fish, marine birds and mammals, and a diverse, productive marine community. This supports our fisheries, supports recreational aspects, and helps tremendously with the economy. However, when El Nino events occur, we lose a lot of that strong winds. They either, damper, they go down, or they disappear completely. And when that happens, we don't get the upwelling, and we don't get the nutrient-rich water or the phytoplankton, zooplankton all the way up the line. And what happens during El Nino events is that we get a crash in the entire community. So El Nino events are, by some estimates, increasing in their frequency and their intensity. We just had one a couple of years ago, and this year is still iffy in terms of whether we're going to have an El Nino or a La Nina, which is the opposite. So that's critical to healthy communities here. We may be jeopardizing some of those productive marine communities. OA. Who can tell me what OA is? All right, you guys got it. Thank you. Ocean acidification, a risky shell game, another ocean-related process with climate change. Here's our carbon dioxide from Charles Keeling graph again. So if we look at this, we've got atmospheric CO2 increasing over time. We've got the oceanic surface CO2. As the atmospheric carbon dioxide is absorbed by the surface of the ocean, that carbon dioxide in the ocean also goes up. And as that goes up, we find ocean surface pH going down, or because it's an inverse relationship, the acidity goes up. And as the acidity goes up, we see all kinds of other problems. We have a decreased pH, which is an increased acidity, lowers the saturation of calcium carbonate in the seawater. And what's happening is for those animals that use or create shells, either an external shell like a snail or an internal shell like a sea star, those organisms are not able to pull out those carbonate ions out of the water to build their shells. And when that happens, you get a decline in those species. So the ocean absorbs about a quarter of all of the global carbon emissions, and that's a lot. So these are the kinds of organisms that would be affected. All the kind of things that we like to eat, like oysters, abalone, scallops, sea stars, all those good things that we eat. And the bottom line is, by the end of this century, it's predicted that the ocean surface will be more acidic than it has been in 400 million years. which could be a problem. Not only does it affect the adults, but it also really affects the larvae, which have this tiny little larval shell. And if they can't build the larval shell, they can't grow up to be adults. So they'll be picked off by predators very quickly. So where do we go from here? Let's go to Paris. Okay. Well, we may not want to go to Paris right now. There seems to be a few other things happening there. But over the past decade or so, President Obama has been working with many other countries, basically the lead on developing the World Climate Summit in 2015. And this was formed by the Conference of the Parties, COP21. So every year there's a Conference of the Parties. This happened to be the 21st Conference of the Parties on the the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. That happened in December of 2015. 194 countries participated in COP21 to formulate this agreement. The goal was to develop an agreement whereby the international community would work together to keep global warming at or below a 2 centigrade degree increase from pre-industrial levels, which again we define somewhere around 1750 or 1800. And they did a good job. They got virtually all of the countries to participate. And so the Paris Agreement was entered into force about a year later, November 4 on 2016, when they ratified it. And after that, from November 4th, 2016, all of the countries then fell in line that agreed to and promised to ratify their promises. There's no legal force there. There's nothing to punish anybody for not participating, but they came together and agreed on the best they could. So currently, all but 2 countries have now signed on to the Paris Agreement, except Syria, which is a war-torn country, and they probably wouldn't be able to do much, at least in this time frame, and Nicaragua. Sort of ironically, Nicaragua didn't sign because it didn't go far enough in protecting the environment. And there is room for one more line down there. Oh, yes. The current administration has indicated it will pull out of the Paris Agreement. And that's all I'm going to say right now, unless I put on my UC Davis hat. So let's continue on with this. The current pledges and policies, we're going to talk about the current pledges and policies from all the countries. So here's 2017. Here we are now. Here's the year 2100, where we've been projecting to for the last 45 minutes or so. So if we continue on the way we're going now, we're expecting that the concentration of carbon dioxide will go up and up and up, and the temperature will reach somewhere around 4.8 to 8.6 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere in that gray range. Now, based on the current projections for policies that exist now or are expected to exist in the future, not what we're doing now, but what we currently are projecting, it's in this blue zone, and it could be around 6 degrees to 7 degrees increase in temperature. Now, based on the pledges and the commitments made at the Paris Agreement, that would bring that down into this red zone, into 4.5 or 5 degree centigrade increase, Fahrenheit increase. And there's some sort of pie in the sky other expectations or hopes that we could get down below 2 degrees centigrade or below 1.5 degrees centigrade. I just don't think that's probably very realistic, but it would sure be nice if we could get the countries to agree to do what they said they would agree in the Paris Agreement. So that would bring us at least a lot lower than what we are projecting now. So as we know, California is a global leader in some of these environmental issues. Assembly Bill 32, which was part of the Global Warming Solutions Act, was passed in 2006 and established a program to reduce California greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels by the year 2020. That was about 15% better than we're doing, or have been doing. And then, just this last year, Senate Bill 32 was passed, which is another part of the Global Warming Solutions Act, which goes further than that by reducing greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by the year 2030. An ambitious undertaking, but possible. Depending on how much the federal government gives us, we'll see what happens. And because California, 40% of California emissions are due to transportation, there's room and there's mechanisms to target specific areas to lower emissions, either by gas standards or vehicle standards. So what can we do on a global basis? Okay, what can we do and other countries do? We can use other renewable energy technologies. Solar is big. China is just overwhelming the market with solar cells. They're taking over. They're making huge profits. Wind is being covered. Germany is the leader in wind right now. We have geothermal. California has quite a few geothermal areas. Currents are one option. Tidal areas are another option. Waves are another option. We need to use everything we have. Hydro, hydrogen fuel cell cars. Now, this is not a good option right now, but they're still in early technological development of those. They may never be good. And then finally, ocean thermal energy conversion. So there's all these other options besides fossil fuels that we could use and should use in order to stem the rise of carbon dioxide emissions. And so what can we do as individuals? Well, we can eat lower on the food chain. We can, and this is also involved in reducing deforestation. If you're not eating as many hamburgers or steaks, that reduces the deforestation, and that will increase the amount that's taken up into the atmosphere. Reduce, reuse, recycle, everything possible, especially plastics, since they're made of fossil fuels. And you can go to EPA's website still and use the EPA's household carbon footprint calculator. You better do it fast. Drive an electric or hybrid car, or use alternative transportation. Turn off all the unused lights and appliances in your home. Use a programmable thermostat. Use Energy Star products, which are great. Don't leave your car idling. And remember, all these local actions, if everybody contributes, they have global consequences. So, we're getting to the bottom line here. I've been saying thousands and thousands of scientists have been working on this issue for a long time. And I think we've finally, there's some little beacons of hope here. We finally found the solution and the answer that proves that global warming is happening. And I will just show you that right now. There you go. Proof positive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. And now we'll open it up to any questions for Tom. And please, for the benefit of our streaming audience, if you have any questions, there are 2 mics at the back. Please ask your question through the mic, or I can bring you this handheld mic as well.
Not on. Go ahead, shout.
Just real quickly, some friends and I were trying to figure out which survey mark that was a few years ago, and we think it's Gulf United 0103 near Mendota. It's Sierra 661, and we're not positive, but that was the best guess we came up with, and it is near the town that was mentioned in an article where we saw that photograph.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of what you were saying.
That survey mark that someone was asking
yes.
about in the photograph, we think it's the permanent identifier is GU0103 and that it's near Mendota.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes?
I have 2 questions. The first one is, what percentage of climate change in the past 100 years can be directly attributed to human activity and not to natural temperature fluctuation or external factors?
Okay, good question. That's a hard question, but it's a good question. There are many factors that contribute to changes in the climate. And there's all kinds of natural cycles that are occurring. There's sunspots. There's the elliptical orbit of the Earth around the sun. There's changes in the planet's positions. All of those are contributing to different aspects of climate change by increasing or decreasing temperature. There's not an easy answer to that, but it's quite significant. I don't have a specific number, but humans are probably more than 50%, probably closer to 75% responsible for the exponential increase in the temperature and the carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. So that's about as close as I can get you, because they change every year, or at least every 4 to 5 years, based on what the IPCC scientists come up with. So that's about as close as I can get.
Okay. And my second question is, would it be more efficient to either take steps now to reduce the future impact of anthropogenic catastrophic climate change, or to let it happen and deal with the consequences as they occur?
Also a good question. Unfortunately, we don't know if we are reaching a threshold where once we cross the threshold, there's a point of no return. So many scientists think that there is a threshold that we're approaching, and that once we cross over that, there's no going back, and it's just going to keep increasing and increasing. So I think most scientists believe that we need to be active in starting to resolve this issue, we need to be continuing to resolve this issue within the next 10 to 20 years. So that's the time frame that most scientists are thinking about. And we're not going to solve it within that time frame. We need to be starting a serious program to diminish carbon emissions during that time period. Okay? Yes?
What is a 100-year storm surge? I didn't catch what that means.
100-year what?
A storm surge that you were talking about for the Bay Area?
Oh, storm surge. I'm sorry. Yes. So a storm surge is when you have a storm that has a lot of wind and a lot of waves on the surface of the ocean. And waves are created by wind moving over the surface of the ocean over certain distances. And you get high wave action. And a storm surge would be high wind producing high waves, and it would move up the shoreline a long distance. And that would create problems up the shoreline. It would flood those areas. That's a storm surge.
His question was about 100 years storm.
The 100-year storm is the part that, the surge created by the 100-year storm. So 100-year storms are storms that occur once every 100 years statistically. And, people who are working in the water division calculate that based on the frequency of storms. Unfortunately, in the early 1900s, late 1800s, they had one yardstick that they measured what was a 10-year storm and a 100-year storm. And now that yardstick has gone totally wrong. And so now we have had to readjust what a 100-year storm is to smaller and smaller time frames. So it's a moving scale.
Over here.
Yes.
I'm a little disappointed when you indicated alternative forms of energy generation. You never talk of one system that is being developed in China and several other countries, and that is liquid thorium-fueled reactors, which are much safer, do not form radioactive uranium that could be used for bombs or anything like that, and it could be much cheaper than some of the things we have done there.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that information. I'm not skilled or knowledgeable of that system, but I'll try to add it to my next slide.
Another question that started in the very beginning of your talk, when you talked about the diurnal variations of the temperature in Hawaii, and because you claimed
it's actually carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide.
Right.
But in my experience in Hawaii is that most of the plants there seem to be evergreen, green all year round, and I would think they would keep approximately the same amount of carbon dioxide winter and summer.
Right.
So it doesn't explain.
Good comment. However, what they're measuring at 11,000 feet is not only what's happening on the ground in Hawaii, it's measuring the entire movement of the atmosphere past that zone.
Okay.
So it's combined from all of the other areas on the Earth, coming from China and Japan and across the Pacific Ocean.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
So I have a friend who's not sure about climate change or at least human-caused, and he always says, well, correlation does not equal causation. And so you've shown graphs that are correlated, and that's great. But I really don't have any good ammunition to say it goes beyond just a correlation. And you had answered this other gentleman's questions about maybe 50 to 75% human caused. Can you shed any more light on how that number might be derived, or have any more ammunition I might be able to use to help him see the light, if you will?
Well, I think there's been so much work on analyzing previous times during our history on what's happening. They've really gotten it down to a very fine science on analyzing what happens when carbon dioxide goes up, what happens when carbon dioxide goes down. And we are affecting the carbon dioxide, which in turn affects temperature and the global heat budget. The global heat budget has been disrupted. That's basically what's happening. And CO2 is, by all studies so far, not all studies, the vast majority, and we're talking about the weight of evidence. We're not talking about one study here and one study here, and maybe 99 studies here and one study that refutes that. We're talking about the large, vast weight of evidence of all of these studies together indicates that yes, it is man influenced, and it is caused by increased carbon dioxide. And all of these other, carbon dioxide is not the only one. There's nitrous oxide, there's methane, there's a whole host of other lesser greenhouse gases that are contributing to this process as well. So I'd say we take the vast weight of evidence from all of these studies and all the scientists working together, and they're all showing the same thing. So, beyond a correlation, they're not all missing it. They're actually showing the same thing.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Question here. If it's true that or given that anthropomorphic influences are creating something that's really bad for us, and a lot of that is coming through the carbon dioxide vector, there have been a number of proposals of attacking that directly and sinking the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. I'm talking about things, for example, like the ocean seeding or ocean fertilization. Would you comment a little bit on those proposals?
Yeah, let me just let me see if I can pull up a slide. No. I'll just try one more thing here. Thought I had it right at the end. There it is. Okay. Okay, so there's been not a million, but there have been probably dozens and dozens of geoengineering proposals out there, and I'll just run through a few of them. Stratospheric sulfur aerosols, shooting sulfur aerosols into the atmosphere, which would lower the development of CO2. Man-made volcanoes producing reflective aerosols, dust and metals. If you pump up metals and dust into the atmosphere, it prevents the sunlight from coming down and hitting the Earth as much. Increase the reflectivity of clouds. Putting reflective sheeting in deserts that reflects the sunlight back out to the atmosphere. Space mirrors. We can put space mirrors out there to reflect the light back up. A lot of these are just harebrained schemes, but this is what's being proposed. Launching billions of reflective balloons into the stratosphere. Deforestation in high latitudes exposes the snow, which increases the reflectivity, and again, resisting heat buildup. Building a 1,000-kilometer wide diffracting space lens between the Earth and the Sun. Light-colored floating litter or garbage in the mid-Pacific Gyre to reflect sun. We have a lot of garbage out there now. Reforestation in tropical habitats to absorb more CO2. Pumping CO2 into the deep ocean. This is sequestration or deep sediment strata. And then what you mentioned, iron fertilization in the ocean, algae growth to then sequester the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So these are only a very few of the geoengineering possibilities that people are proposing. Lots of them out there. Yes?
Let's assume that in spite of all the things that we could do, we don't do it, and we reach that point of no return. What will life be like if the planet goes into a point of no return?
Well, I can't tell you exactly, but it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be very difficult for your kids and your kids' kids. We need to be good stewards of the Earth, And that's what we're trying to do right now, is to prevent that from happening. We will see that the sea level is going to rise tens of feet, flooding the coastal areas in many cities, making them uninhabitable rather. The temperatures will cause human health issues, and it's not going to be pretty. I mean, it'll just keep continuing. CO2, the reality is that the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere today is actually going to stay there for several hundred years. Now, we can reduce carbon dioxide and reduce it to the point where it slowly disintegrates, but it's going to be there for a long time. We just need to stop pumping more and more and more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So there's a whole host of things that are going to look pretty bad if we don't stop it and reduce our carbon emissions. Yes?
I have a couple of arcane questions, and then I'd like to make a couple comments. In a climate science class I took at Stanford, adult education, the text by David Archer said that there was less than 0.1 gigaton of carbon per year as a background emission from geological sources. From a lecture I saw back in 2012, Don DiPaolo over in Berkeley said that the background geologic rate of carbon emission was 0.03 gigatons per year. Do you have any other figure you'd like to add to that group? Does that seem, between 0.1 and 0.3, seem like a reasonable amount of...
You're asking me to verify what they're saying?
Pardon? Yeah, do you have any knowledge of carbon geologic background emissions?
Well, right now we're pumping 9 billion
10
tons
billion
of carbon into the atmosphere every year. So
that's about 300 times more than the background rate based on DiPaolo's.
Right. I can't verify what their lectures are saying.
Could you talk to the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which is a long-term El Nino or La Nina events? The period between 1940 and 76, when there was a decline, matched fairly consistently with a La Nina or a cooling Pacific Decadal Oscillation. And can that be varying the temperature gradient with that strong signal?
The PDOs, the Pacific Decadal Oscillations, do occur about a roughly 10-year cycle, 20-year cycle. But these other processes are increasing all the time.
Right, but that cycle affects the smaller carbon dioxide.
Sure, right.
And bends it and changes it. Which
absolutely. We have all kinds of, I didn't list them all, but we have many, many natural cycles that are all contributing to this process.
Right. Yeah. Stephen Chu in a lecture back in 2014 said 4, 5, 6 degrees Celsius is non-adaptable bad. He made it very, very simple.
Who says this?
Dr. Stephen Chu, former Secretary of Energy, Nobel laureate. In terms of this young man's question over here about how do we know that humans are causing this, I did a study of basic ice core data and the Keeling curve, and if you look at the ice core data, when we came out of the Ice Age, roughly from 18,000 to 12,000 years ago, 6,000 years, we added roughly 90 parts per million, or the planet in its own natural processes, whatever they were, added 90 parts per million. From 1958, when Keeling started his curve, to 2017, 60 years, we've added another 90 parts per million. Now that's 100 times faster than a natural process, and the rise of temperature and carbon dioxide coming out of an ice age is pretty rapid. That's a fairly rapid change in...
Right.
And presently we're adding roughly 3 parts per million carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, so in 30 years we will add roughly another 90 parts. That looks like a very uncomfortable exponential curve to me.
Uncomfortable in what way?
Well, James Hansen, Philip Gingrich, as a geologist who wrote an article back in National Geographic, said that roughly the best analogy to what would happen to us if we have runaway climate change was the PETM, the Paleo-Eocene thermal maximum, roughly 65 million years ago. and that raised temperature about 5 or 6 degrees Celsius.
Right.
And that lasted roughly 100,000 years.
Okay, so what's your question?
The question is how bad things are and how bad they will be and how long they will last. The Arctic sea ice that you mentioned, we've lost 80% of the mass. That's never coming back. Not in any human time frame. We're still adding 10 gigatons of carbon.
Right. So what's your question? I don't understand what you're asking.
What would it take to get people to realize how bad this is going to be?
Now, there's a good question. There's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. That's why many of us are working along the sidelines, trying to influence this process. I'm here trying to educate people so that when these people speak to other people, they can speak with an educated background. Okay?
Okay.
And that's what I'm trying to do, as best I can. I'm an ecologist. I'm not a geologist. I'm not an ice corp specialist. I'm just trying to do what I can do. And yes, a 4 to 5 degree or a 7 to 10 degree or a 12 to 15 degree increase in temperature is going to be really ugly. I mean, there will be humans that survive, but it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be really ugly. Many people will die. I don't have the answer to what exactly will happen, but it's maybe close to unsurvivable. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah. So this may require you to put on one of your hats, but I'm wondering when I see things when I see things on the internet that talk about the changes that are happening at the EPA, I'm just sort of curious, like how true they are. Like, are people actually being told not to be making these, continuing to do scientific research? Are they being asked to, stop working in their departments, wherever they may be, to be doing the things that we need to do so that we can stop climate change? Like, what is actually happening in terms of stopping these scientific inquiries and the policymakers from making changes so that we can stop this?
Well, I read the news just like you do. And I understand and speak with other people that work for the federal government as well. I do know that there's tremendous cuts in funding for many of these programs. And there's removal of terms and scientific phrases like climate change, global warming, things like that from websites. And the rationale sometimes escapes me. I mean, I really don't understand how, when the vast majority of the world and the countries in the world are all supporting this, how we can't support it on the country that led the effort to create the global Paris Agreement. It's possible that if the United States pulls out of the Paris Climate Accord, that other countries would feel possibly let down by pulling out, whoever that country was, and that they might think, well, why should we extend ourselves and expend the money it takes to accomplish this task if the leader of the free world is not doing it? So I'm concerned as a citizen, just as you are. I don't have an answer for that. Well, I do have an answer, but you know the answer just as well as I do. All I can do is do the best I can in trying to educate people so that they can speak intelligently and make the right choices. When you contribute to a certain cause and you vote for a certain person, those are the choices that you make as well as an educated citizen. Yes?
Are there some voices in the public that are speaking out to get to try to bring some rational thinking into, and that are heard, to get the government to do something?
Well, sure, there's lots of them.
Well, they're not being heard, are they?
Well, I think they're being heard, but the question is, how can we accomplish what we're trying to accomplish in terms of lowering carbon dioxide emissions along with the rest of the countries of the world? That's the challenge that we have. Yes?
So keep that hat on. So relative to the Paris Accord and the administration's latest little decision to pull us out, which isn't going to happen immediately, right?
Right. The Paris Accord, our participation in the Paris Accord is pretty locked in. So if there was an effort to pull out, that effort would take at least 3 or 4 years to be finalized.
So what about Congress? Do we see both sides of the aisle understanding what you've talked about today? Do we have members on we know where most of the Democrats are. Do we have, what's the other side of the aisle doing? Do they understand this? Do we have people on both sides that, I think that kind of speaks to this gentleman's question, that are willing to stand up and say, wait, this is not a political issue, or it shouldn't be a political issue?
Well, just from the facts and the information that I read in the news, whether that's fake news or real news, I see that there are individuals on both sides of the aisle that do understand the facts about climate change. And hopefully those people will step up and make the right decisions. Yes?
I can give a little bit of an answer to that. I'm Ro Khanna's district director. And the congressman has been approached by people to join the Climate Change Caucus. But the Climate Change Caucus has a rule, sort of like the ballroom dancing thing that my cousin was approached to about putting her kid in. They would only allow a girl to join if a boy also joined, so that everyone would have partners. And my cousin had a son, and her friend had a daughter, and her friend wanted the daughter to be in the ballroom dancing thing, so my cousin made her son take ballroom dancing so this other girl could do it. So far, Congressman Khanna has not found a Republican partner to allow him to join the Climate Change Caucus, but they are working on that. Some of these guys who might be feeling a little bit endangered next year, maybe that will provide some motivation. But, Al Gore was right. This is an inconvenient truth. And a lot of people just don't want to think about it or accept it. Right. As a scientist, it's appalling that we even have to be debating scientific fact. I mean, it's just appalling. I'm sure you feel the same way. But we do. And so the best thing we can do is tell our friends in other states to wake up and smell the coffee. And that, there is a place that had a runaway greenhouse effect. It's called Venus, and the temperature is 700 degrees, and they have sulfuric acid clouds. I mean, a mass extinction event is quite possible here if we don't get our act together.
Well, I appreciate your information. I think my goal here tonight was to provide the updated information on the science behind climate change. That was my goal. And
you're doing a great job, by the way.
It's unfortunate that this topic has become politicized. I can't control that. My personal feelings are my personal feelings. I think all of you have your own personal feelings. Whichever way you vote and whichever way you spend your money is your business. But I'm concerned about how we can lower the carbon dioxide concentrations, protect this planet for our kids and their kids, and whatever I can do, I'm going to do in the future to try to accomplish that. So I think that probably brings us to a close here. Thank you all for coming.